Russo's Books, in partnership with the One Book Project and Kern County Library, presents the Women Who Inspire Author Interview Series, featuring Lynne Kelly, author of Song for a Whale, recorded on September 14th, 2020. First, I wanted to welcome everybody to the One Book Project Women Who Inspire Author Interview Series, brought to us by the Kern County Library, and of course, us, Russo's Books. Thank you very much for attending. This is our third such interview, and I'm really excited to be interviewing the one and only Lynne Kelly, who wrote Song for a Whale, which is such a lovely book. So thank you for coming, Lynne.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. First, would you be willing to describe your book to anyone watching who hasn't read it yet?
Yes, this is about a 12-year-old Iris who is a smart and funny and creative girl. She is the only deaf student at her school, so she has this experience of feeling isolated and alone despite being surrounded by others. And one day in science class, when she learns about a whale who sings a song that other whales can't understand, she feels an immediate connection to him and decides she needs to track him down in some way and reach out to him and let him know that she understands that song that he's singing.
Excellent. Who do you want to read it in the most perfect world? Like, if you can make somebody read the book, because they really need to.
So you probably want a more specific answer than everybody in the world.
That counts. Everybody
sure.
in the world should read it.
That's what every author wants, right?
Right.
Sure. This is a good book for someone who likes whales, of course, and someone interested in deafness and sign language. And it really is a book about communication and connection. So anyone who, and maybe that's all of us this year. Of course, I didn't know that when I started out, but aren't we all feeling the need for more connection and communication now? So it touches on all of those in an adventure about tracking down a whale.
Song for a Whale was selected as one of the middle grade companion books to fit the theme of women and girls in tech and women's empowerment for the One Book Project here in Kern County. Your character, Iris, is very tech savvy, as she is skilled in electronics and enjoys fixing antique radios. Girls are often not portrayed as being into things like electronics, which is unfortunate and erroneous because we do. Why did you pick that hobby for Iris?
When I gave her that hobby, I didn't know how important that would become in her solving the problem. So it really worked out perfectly for later in the story. I gave that to her really because it's an interesting hobby, and it was a way to show that she is smart and creative, even though that's not easy for people to see when she's at school day to day, because she really can't communicate with others. And it shows too where she is at home, where she feels most at home. It's when she is in her room, surrounded by all this stuff that would look like a pile of junk to most people. But she's got her hands in an old radio. I got the idea for that because of a deaf student who I worked with, someone older than Iris. This was a college student I was with from his freshman orientation day until graduation day. And he's now an engineer, an electrical engineer, which makes sense. But he was like that his whole life. He was the 12-year-old kid who people brought their 1940s radios to for repair, their old radios and old TVs. So I thought that was fascinating. Really, it's a fascinating hobby for anyone, and especially a kid. And on top of that, a deaf kid who cannot hear the things that he's fixing when they're done. He's not hearing the music or hearing the program that's being played, but he knew what electrical circuit looked like and what should connect where and what parts were no good and needed replacing. So I thought that was interesting. And then I thought to give that skill to Iris, and that it worked out well for the story too. And that connection to sound that she's searching for in a way to give to this whale, to give him this message.
Do you enjoy similar hobbies?
You would think that after being in electrical engineering classes for 4 years, I would have picked up some of that, but no, I'm not adept at that either. But I find it interesting. I mean, you could take all these parts, these wires and these components, and put them together and make something that plays music, and that from how far away, and plays shows you a TV show or a radio program. you can listen to. So I find it interesting, but no, it's not a skill that I have.
Cool. What are some of your hobbies?
It seems like I'm writing whenever, I can't call writing a hobby anymore since I do that, for things to send to editors to hopefully get published. So I do enjoy reading. I always have enjoyed reading. Just recently, I haven't gone lately because of how the world is right now. I did this year pick up water aerobics. So when I can, I like doing that. So that's, I guess, the hobby I have now. But I have to see, can I go back yet? And how many people are they letting in? But I started that because I tore my knee, and so I couldn't go on walks and things like that. So I needed something I could do for activity and for some exercise. And I found I really like it. I do like being in the water. So hopefully I'll get back to that really soon if it's safe to go. And yeah, but I found I really enjoyed that.
That's good. That's good. I like being in the water too. I'm not in it enough, so
it's an underwater Zumba class. So not just water aerobics, but it's
wow,
aquatic Zumba. Yeah,
some serious stuff. Zumba kicks your butt.
Nobody can see you. Really. So if you're not doing it right, you're underwater. Nobody knows.
So it's good Zumba for the anxious. Yeah.
Yes, if you're socially anxious, just get in, and yeah, nobody can tell if you're not doing it right.
Excellent. Another unique element of this book is that Iris is deaf. You were able to portray her in such a way that she's not defined by her deafness, nor does it limit her as a person. She's very real. Are you able to tell us about that?
Oh, thank you. I'm glad she came through that way. It was really important for me to show her as a strong deaf girl who's comfortable with that part of herself. And yes, there are challenges, there are obstacles, and there are frustrations when she can't communicate with someone, but I didn't want anyone to come away with the impression that she wishes that she could hear. And that's been the case, I think, with every deaf person I've known. If that's come up, I haven't heard any who've said that they wish they could hear, because despite those obstacles and despite how many people who can't communicate with them very well, being deaf is part of who they are, and that's their identity, and their language is tied to that, and there's a culture tied to it, and there are strong friendships they have within that deaf culture. So I wanted that to come through, that she is a strong deaf girl, and this is something about her that she would never want to change. She does have that need for belonging. So there's a different setting she'd like to be in, but that would mean more deaf people to interact with. So that's something about her. I really wanted to show that she is a proud and strong and confident deaf girl.
Well, it's really excellent that you did that. So thank you for pulling it off. Communication and the lack of it is a major theme in this book. How important do you think communication is?
Well, and again, we're all feeling that this year, aren't we? Of course, it's important, it's vital, and we're needing to reach out to others and to connect. And it's so isolating if someone can't communicate. And a lot of us are experiencing isolation like we haven't before. And thankfully, we're able to still connect online. I don't know how much worse would it have been, pre-internet, if we were going through this pandemic and we're not able to connect to people online, not able to have Zoom meetings, even though it's not the same as in person, but at least we can connect and talk to other people and have our bookstore events and our meetings and such. So yeah, I mean, we all know now, it's really driven home this year how important that is. And it's so isolating if someone is even among other people but can't communicate with them.
So, yeah, and that sense of isolation can be so overwhelming.
Right.
Yeah. Iris's grandmother is a major part of Iris's story, and that particularly touched me because my own grandmother was a significant part of my life. I would not be who I am without her. Why did you choose that relationship for your book?
Oh, and this ties into showing that this deafness is an important part of her life and one she wouldn't wish to change. Without her deaf grandmother, I could understand how anyone who reads it who isn't familiar with deafness, isn't familiar with sign language, would think what a horrible life this girl has. And this poor girl, she can't talk to anyone at school, and then can't talk to anyone at home, and doesn't have anyone there. So that was important for me to avoid, giving the impression that this is a sad existence that she has. So in this relationship with your grandmother, who is deaf like she is, we see what a difference it is, and that this is a part of her life that is very satisfying and where she feels a lot of joy when she is with someone who shares that experience and who shares that language and that culture. So we see what a contrast it is when she's, say, at school, for example, where she can't really talk to anyone, and then here she is with grandma, and that's a very joyful part of her life. So I love that relationship, how it worked out. And grandma ended up being my favorite character to write, I think. And she wasn't as strong a character in my earlier drafts, and I think it was my editor who said, let's have her be a co-conspirator on this journey instead of just sort of going along for the ride. Because I knew that she was grieving, and we need to kind of come around again and work through that. But it was too much of that before, and we want our characters to work through their problem on their own. But I had Iris doing too much on her own, and it just wasn't so realistic, and grandma wasn't as strong. So then once I made her someone who yes is grieving, but she's also one who knows, yeah, we need to go on this adventure, so let's do it, let's make it happen. And then she turned out to be a lot more fun. So with that, then really it was to illustrate what a difference it makes when someone does have someone who understands them and who speaks their language and shares their experience.
Yeah, it's kind of the most intimate part of communication, when somebody really gets who you are.
Yes.
Iris is 12, and she's feeling some very big feelings. And so she goes on a pretty huge adventure in the story. I wasn't going to describe any more detail because, spoilers just in case. But can you remember something that you felt as strongly about when you were 12?
I was thinking of this, and I don't think there was anything that would have made me, run away and go halfway across the country, for example. I know I've always loved animals. So I have that in common with her, that I love animals. But and I know at age 12, our problems that we have then, we look back as adults and think that was nothing, it's no big deal. But when you're 12, it's a huge deal. Like any problem you have with your friends, or think about being at school and being lonely, and if you couldn't talk to anyone or felt like you couldn't. And we've probably all had that feeling that no one else has gone through what I am. So we have that feeling of being isolated despite being around others. So nothing like this as strongly as Iris does in this case. But for her, and not having any close friendships really that she can, no one she can interact with every day, then I think it makes sense that she develops this attachment and kind of goes to an extreme to try to solve that. But she's someone who really needs to stand up for herself, but that's hard to do, and she is 12. So even though it's quite a journey she takes on, it's easier, I think, to stand up for someone else than it is for ourselves.
I think that's true even for not 12-year-olds. I think,
it is.
In our own lives, like if somebody's being mean to us, we'll take it. But if you're being mean to my friend or my family member, then right. It's on.
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time too, with kids, we kind of dismiss their feelings because, they're just kids. They don't have big feelings yet, but they do. They have the same feelings that grown-ups have. They just don't have the same experiences dealing with them and coping with them. So
Right.
I think it's kind of hard when we're like, oh yeah, I know your heart is broken, but you'll get over it, because you don't feel that way. It's the first time it's happened to you.
Yeah.
Or there's, this mission that you want to accomplish because it's, as important as the whole world, because it is to you.
That's your world. Yeah. It's hard to remember that as adults, because we, at 10 or 12 or however old our characters are, we didn't have, decades of insight, and experience to look back and through that lens. So yeah, at the time, this is super important to you, and something goes wrong with your friends, with those relationships, those are so important right then, and that's your world. So it is really important. They do have these big feelings they go through that we can look back on as adults and think are not such a big deal, but they sure are when you're going through it.
Absolutely. Are any of the characters in Song for a Whale inspired? And sorry, let me start that over as I tongue twist myself and everything. Are any of the characters in Song for a Whale inspired by real people or creatures in this case?
Yes, Iris is made up of not one person, but of many deaf students who I've known and worked with. My earliest jobs interpreting were in elementary schools, and I worked with a lot of kids who were frustrated like she was, and also I knew just funny and smart kids. And so she has some qualities of those that I've known, and then of course the electronic skill. But yes, the whale in particular is based strongly on a real whale. In the book, it's the 55 hertz whale. In real life, it's 52 hertz whale, also called the lonely whale or blue 52. And this is a whale that sings at a frequency too high for other whales to understand. We know that this is a baleen whale, meaning it's not one with teeth, but they have the baleen plates that are like the big combs that filter their food. We know that by the song that he sings. That's all we know about him, is that he has an unusual song. So most whales sing much, much lower than that, like 10 to 20 hertz. This one sings at 52 hertz. So apparently that's screechingly high for a whale, and it's not understandable. For us humans, it's still low. It's a low note of a tuba, but still it's way too high for a whale. And so there are some ideas that maybe it sings this unusual song because it's a hybrid. Could be that this is a blue whale, fin whale cross. Again, because of the song, that's why some scientists think this might be a reason, because the song has qualities of a blue whale song, some of a fin whale song. In either case, too high. So that could be a reason. Could be just something else about him is unusual, like different body shape or something. We could compare that again to a musical instrument. If it's bent or cracked or misshapen, it's going to have a different sound. So that's all we know, because of underwater microphones, hydrophones in the world's oceans. And it was in the late 80s that someone heard this song and figured out that's a whale. He's just one who's really weird. So and then they would track him then for a few years after that and see where he was swimming off the Pacific coast.
I had never heard of that whale before your book, and
I hadn't. Yeah.
And I like to read about nature and things, and be like with that the killer whale mother just recently who had her new calf, but her last calf, when it passed and she carried it around for 2 weeks, I like literally bawled for her.
It was heartbreaking. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so happy, and I've been like on edge hoping everything's okay with this one, but I was surprised too. I hadn't heard of the 52 hertz whale before, because he's been swimming around that we know of since the late 80s, maybe longer. And it wasn't until like 2015, I think, that I read about him. And I just saw like an image fly by on Twitter of a whale. It turned out to be just a stock image of a whale, but had a long kind of melodramatic caption with it. But I thankfully scrolled back to read what was that about, because I like animals, I like ocean life, and read that there's this whale who sings like no other, and it's like he has his own language out there. So I got obsessed pretty quickly and had to read all I could about him. Woke up at 4 a.m. and started writing, which is really unusual for me. I like my sleep, and that's like middle of the night to me. So I knew pretty quickly, this is something I have to write about. I don't know the story yet, but I have to write about this animal.
That's cool that it touched you that way. This creature that you've never met and is a completely different species and lives in a completely different environment than we do, and you've had that connection to it that you needed to explore. It'd be nice if more of us kind of had that connection. I think we'd be a little nicer to nature.
Yes. Yeah. And I kept wondering, what's his life like, and is he aware he sings like no one else, and does he care? Is he still waiting for something to answer back? So all these questions that are impossible to answer, but I like wondering about, and then just had to write him into a story, and then come up with who's the kid who's going to be so obsessed that she's compelled to get up and go find him.
Song for a Whale is starting to rack up awards like the Schneider Family Book Award, the Parents' Choice Silver Award. It's an Odyssey honoree, and it's on several libraries and schools' Battle of the Books lists. How does it feel to get those kinds of accolades?
Oh, it feels really good. Yeah, I mean, that's always an honor, that um, that someone has noticed the book. People who volunteer for award committees, and I know there are so many good books that come out every year, and they're reading so many books to consider for an award. So it's always an honor when it does get selected for that, and for these state reading lists too. They are reading so many books, like these often it's librarians who volunteer for these committees, and they're reading so many books every year. And I see so many good books every year that could easily be on these lists. So it's always such an honor when someone decides it needs to be included on a list like that.
Well, and it shows that you have considerable skill as a writer too, to be able to connect with that big of an audience and to have them feel like it's an important book for the people that they're connected to read. So congratulations.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, and then it's going to reach a wider audience too, which is great. That
Yeah.
there'll be new group of readers out there that'll discover it.
Yeah. You used to be a special education teacher. How did being a teacher influence your career now as a writer?
It actually was when I was teaching that I became a writer. And it wasn't anything that I planned to do, even though I've always been a big reader. But I was teaching special ed, and these were students who would come to my classroom, and they had reading levels from maybe kindergarten to almost fourth grade. But these students were like third through fifth grade. And so my classroom was surrounded by bookshelves of reading levels from kindergarten and up. And we worked a lot on finding the right book for you, something not too easy, not too hard, but let's find the right book, not one that's huge because you just like showing people what you're reading, and not anything too easy because you don't want the challenge. Let's work on that. And so I was surrounded by children's literature every day, and introducing some old favorites to the students and discovering some new ones. And so then when I got the idea for my first book, I was first thinking, oh, this could be something to write down and tell my students at school. And this is a good illustration of perseverance. I could pass that along to them, and it grew from there. And maybe this is something good. I could figure out how do you get a book published, and then it went from there. So it's really because I was teaching and was in that space to sort of take an idea like that and think about how it could become a book for students of this age. And it's actually why I'm no longer teaching, because I found quickly teaching doesn't leave time for anything else. And anyone who's a teacher knows it's hard to find time for anything else if you are a teacher. At least for me it was. And I never quite caught up on things like paperwork and planning. And I like the actual teaching part, and I love my students, but I just never quite caught up on all the other stuff there is to do as a teacher. So because I had the sign language job also, I had that flexibility. I could then leave and just have sign language interpreting as the only day job, because when that's done, it's done. I finish working for the day and I can go home and then have some time to write. So it's really because of that I was in that space to turn an idea into a book.
Yeah. And people have this idea that like, oh, you only work from like 8 to 3 and you get summers off and all these holidays, but no, because that whole time you're still working in your head, you're going to PDs, you're developing things. And then I don't think people realize how much paperwork is involved with special ed. You have like these 40-page IEPs that are federal documents that have to be done a certain way. And even other teachers don't even get that. So yeah, it's important, but it's a huge time suck. So.
It is. And every kid, has their own IEP. So it's kind of like a different curriculum for each kid. So there's, more on top of that.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
You have another book called Chained. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, that was the one that I got the idea for there. So here's that. I was at a presentation, nothing to do with elephants, but the speaker was talking about success and failure. And an example he gave was apparently when a young elephant is trapped, caught and trapped like for a show or a circus, it'll struggle really, really hard to break free. And then once it gives up forever. So then decades later, you could have this huge elephant with the same little rope or chain keeping it in place, because it's not going to try again to break free because it it failed at that a long time ago. So again, it could easily break free from that, but won't try it. And so that's where I thought, oh, that'd be something interesting to write down for my students about how this elephant in the story could just get home if it would only break free from this little rope that's keeping it in place, but it doesn't believe that it can. So, and as much as I love elephants, yes, that's one way not to be like them. If that is true, that they give up and give up forever after failing one time. We don't want to do that. So, and that story, started there and obviously grew into a novel. I was thinking of a picture book at the time, so it would be much smaller. And now I look back and think a picture book, that's so few words. It looks like it's easy, but it's very hard to tell a whole story in very few words. So that grew from there. And yeah, so that's the story too about it does have a connection with a kid and an animal who have a parallel life in a way, because this kid, his keeper, Hostin, who's 10 years old, is not literally chained up, but feels like he is, because he's not allowed to leave. So he and this elephant he's caring for have that similar life, that they could each break away from this place and get home, and they'll need to work together to make that happen.
How was it going from writing about the things in chained, to writing about things in Song for a Whale?
Well, with any book that I write, I feel like I don't know how to write a book anymore. Like I sit down to start a new book, and I feel like, how did I do that? And I've heard so many authors say the same thing, so I feel good knowing I'm not alone in that we sort of figure things out every time. So they do have some similarities in that there's a character with a strong connection to an animal. Totally different settings, of course. There's different research for each one, but they still have that common thread throughout them. So I still have that strong relationship to an animal there, and then where the character feels like they have a similar life in a way.
I like it. I love elephants and I love whales, and I kind of feel like elephants are almost like the whales of the land.
They are related, actually. Yeah, and elephants are good swimmers. It seems surprising, but they are actually good swimmers, and they have a built-in snorkel.
Yes. What are your future projects? Can you tell us about what you're working on right now?
Yes, what I'm working on now. Hopefully, I'm finishing it really, really soon, because it's taking longer than I thought. But that's another thing that's happening this year, is people are finding it's kind of hard to focus lately. I don't know if that's happening to anyone else, but
oh yeah, definitely
hard to focus lately. But I'm getting to where I'm on the last few chapters of this one, on this revision that I'm working on. So this one is about, I'm actually mashing together two different books and maybe part of a third that I was working on. I think it's working out. So it's about, it has three friends, and they're very different kids, but are similar in some ways, in that they're each kind of working through some things that they need to let go of, things that have happened in each of their families. Again, very different, but they're having to kind of redefine things and find their place, and figure out what to let go of and how to move on from some tragedies they've been through. The three of them are going to take care of an injured octopus one summer.
Oh, cool.
And it's close to home, so I'm not having to do research about places I'm not familiar with. It's I have this fictitious Gulf Coast of Texas town. I'm kind of pulling cool things from different coastal towns and putting them in this one.
That's cool. That way everybody can go, oh, that's familiar feeling.
Yes.
And octopuses, I mean, they are amazing and
fascinating
strange
too.
creatures.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a very flexible character. You can literally make him do anything.
Right.
Oh, flexible. Yeah, that's a bad pun, because they really are very flexible
yeah.
too, like literally. What is something that you wish someone would ask about Song for a Whale that no one has asked yet?
Oh, let's see. I don't know if no one has asked, but often, I don't get asked often about my favorite things I discovered when researching whales. So I could tell you a little about that. I think my favorite, because I am fascinated with communication too. And we know now with whale songs, by listening to them and finding patterns in them, and even charting their music. So I have that in the book. Iris discovers that. This is from a set of CDs I found that about humpback whale songs, and there's someone who I think is probably really good at writing music, and listened to a humpback whale song and wrote it as sheet music.
Oh,
So you can
cool.
see like nothing like our boring human songs with little dots and circles. They need like different shapes and colors, up and down the musical scale to transcribe their music. So what we noticed from those is there are patterns in the songs, so they aren't just random songs they're singing. It seems like they must have some meaning if they're singing the same patterns over and over again. And they'll sing like a series that's a pattern, and then it gets shorter and shorter until they then start a new song and then go back to the old one. Probably my favorite thing I saw is that whales that meet in a certain location, like say during the winter when they've migrated, they will of course interact with whales they don't normally see during the summer months, and they end up trading parts of their songs. So it's almost like they're sharing a playlist. So people who know whale songs very well, they can tell not just that's a humpback whale from Alaska, or that's a whale from Australia, but they can tell, oh, that's a humpback whale from Alaska who's been hanging out with a whale from Norway, because he's singing like one of their song clips he's added to his own. So that I thought was fascinating too, that they pass songs to each other when they meet up.
Yeah, they're really amazing creatures. I was kind of like, I don't want to say shocked because that sounds so snotty, but like shocked when I found out that we have figured out that dolphins have names for each other. Like
I
every
love that
dolphin has
too.
their
Yes,
own name.
yes, and they sing names of dolphins who've died. So they,
Yeah.
like, those who listen to them can tell, oh, they're singing the name of that. That's what they used to call that dolphin that died 5 years ago. They must be talking about him. So that's another fascinating thing. I wish I knew what they were saying, but we know there's some meaning behind
They remember their people.
that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and then with the whales picking up song clips from other whales, it's like they're, passing on the stories of their people to
Right.
everyone. Yeah. It's very, very cool stuff. Um, it's time for the ubiquitous book nerd question. What is your writing process like, and how do you find inspiration?
Oh, well, for the inspiration, I think that's all around us. So we have to be sort of watching for it and thinking, how can this turn into a story? Like I wasn't looking for a story idea, but I found out about this whale who can't communicate with others, and I knew. I think we just know when there's an idea that we can't let go of. It has to turn into a story somehow. And so for me, it's been finding a connection that an animal in particular has to us humans. For my process, it's different every day. It depends on what I have going on, how much work I'm doing, and what else I have going on at home, other things that I have to do. I try to write something every day. Not every writer does, but if I let too many days go by, then I can feel the book sort of crawling away from me, and it's harder to get back to it. So at least something every day I try to write. Um, Sometimes I do have hours at a time I can write, so I try to take advantage of that time and get as much done as I can. I do best when I set a timer and put my phone aside, because there are so many distractions out there. We know that too, don't we? So much
Yes.
to look at, so much news to keep up with, but then I'm not going to get any writing done. So I have to, like, say, set a timer for 20 minutes. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to write, and I'm going to write without stopping, because I do my best drafting and creating if I'm not stopping to think about it too much. So I kind of I have the idea for the story in my head, and if I just write it, then some good content comes out. I'm going to edit it later, but if I try to stop and edit now and try to make it too perfect now, then I just never get it finished. So I think it's best if we can put aside that editor and keep in mind, nobody has to see this right now. This is the time to just draft it. Nobody's going to look at this. So, and I like to write by hand too. And I have so many pretty notebooks, like this one here. I have others that that if they're too pretty, I just don't want to write in them, as if I'm going to ruin them, or what else am I going to do with them but write in them. So I'm trying to get better about that and just write in these notebooks. Sometimes writing by hand helps. There's something about that, working with pen and paper, that gets the story flowing better than a computer does for me anyway. If I'm trying to work through something and I just stop and I'm staring at the screen, then I write by hand just for a couple minutes. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what these characters are going to say to each other. And then now I can write it. Now I can type it. And so then I try to get the story out like that. Do quick, as many words as I can write in say 20 minutes. And then when it's all done, go back and edit. Now I have a story. Now I can work with something.
Yeah, not overwork it before you even get it out.
Right. Yeah, because if we're too, and then we get too scared about what other people are going to think. Because if I'm thinking about editing it right now, that means I'm thinking about other people reading it already, and there's not time for that yet. This is time to get the story out, and that's much later to think about other eyes being on the paper.
Yeah, I do art also, and that was like the hardest thing for me to learn, was when to just stop and walk away from the piece, and it's good enough, it's finished, because I would rework it and rework it and rework it until I just destroyed it. And it's tricky, but yeah, you have to be like, just let it be itself. And if there's something else you need to say, you can go back and edit it, or in my case, go do another different one.
Yes.
But yeah, I can't just kill it before it's even had a chance to be itself yet.
Right. Yeah. So I get the story down, and then no one else is looking at it yet. We have to just write the story that's in our head, get that on the paper, and then later it's time for editing.
Yeah. My librarian friends wanted me to ask you what your favorite titles were when you were younger.
Oh, I know Charlotte's Web was always a favorite. And Betsy Byers' books were probably the first time I ventured out of the picture book section of the library and into the chapter books. Still love picture books. I remember being in the library and thinking, I think I've read all these, or if I don't know what else there is to read. And some girl there my age said, "Oh, our books are here," and it was like this angel chorus started singing, and I saw these bookshelves that I've never looked at before, because I didn't know that was my part of the library too. So I know Betsy Byers was one I would check out from there, when I discovered there were these bigger books I could read. So that was a favorite, and E.B. White too was always a favorite.
You might someday be somebody else's E.B. White.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, I appreciate the very small movement of illustrating adult books, like or semi-adult books, like with the Harry Potter series, and they're reissuing them as completely illustrated.
Right.
And then they were doing that for a little while with, I think it was Clive Barker and Stephen King books, but that's been a long time ago now, and I think they stopped. But I really like that, because yeah, picture books have so many really beautiful images in them.
Yes. And again, telling a story in so few words.
Yes.
Yeah, they're powerful.
The follow-up to that is, did you like hanging out in your school or city library?
I loved hanging out in the library, and I actually went looking for something today, because I knew we would mention libraries. So I was glad I was so glad I found this. I knew it was in a scrapbook somewhere, but this I found. It was my book tracker from our public library, and
cool!
It's from 1976. That sounds like a long time ago, because it is. But for any students watching, a quick explanation. 1976, our country was 200 years old. So there were a lot of celebrations throughout the year for that bicentennial, that 200th birthday of our country. So here's our flag-themed book tracker from our public library. I'll post this online tomorrow too. I'm going to tag the library. And so like on each stripe of the flag, we would write down, the handwriting's nice, so this has to be the librarian writing down when I brought a book in and said, I read this. So they would write on one of the stripes a book, that I read, and then give me a star for every book that I read. So yes, this was from my public library that year. And I was just so proud I got to fill up the flag with the books that I read that summer.
That is so cool.
And then my school library too, always loved hanging out.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you got to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, and here comes Holly. I know you wanted to see her. She's finally walking in. I'll have to move the computer. Hey, Holly. I think she was eating dinner. Let's see.
Oh, hi. Hi, Holly.
She doesn't know what's going on. Yeah.
She's like, what's the strange voice, Mom? Well, yay. Now, yeah, definitely my evening's complete now. Got to talk with
There
an
we go.
awesome
Witness
author
here.
and see
Yeah.
her pupper.